I'm Mara, 34, the older sister, the one who was praised too quietly and compared too loudly, the one who learned early that being the responsible one wasn't admiration, it was camouflage. The more perfect I appeared, the easier it was for my family to forget I was there. For most of my life, that silence became a kind of home. I stayed calm, I stayed small, I stayed harmless, because that was the role everyone expected from me. But this Christmas, everything changed. I didn't walk into my parents' house as the invisible daughter this time. I walked in carrying 8 months of truth, painful, heavy, and sharpened into something I wasn't willing to swallow anymore. Snow covered the neighborhood like a fresh coat of forgiveness the universe had gifted everyone except me. The windows of the house glowed with warm yellow light, the kind meant to make families look closer than they actually were. My mother had decorated everything as if she were hosting royalty. Candles arranged in perfect symmetry, poinsettias in every corner, a Christmas tree glittering with ornaments chosen to impress guests rather than preserve memories. Nothing about the house had changed, but I had. And maybe that was why, from the moment I stepped inside, I could sense the imbalance more sharply than ever. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, one arm full of serving spoons. My father waved from the kitchen, wearing the same smile he used whenever he didn't want to choose sides. Background noises of family chatter floated through the hallway, bright, cheerful, oblivious. Then I saw her, Serena, my younger sister. She stood at the top of the stairs like she'd been waiting for her cue to enter the scene, hair curled, dress shimmering, smile polished. Everything about her broadcasted the same unspoken message she'd carried all her life. I'm the star here. Don't forget it. She descended with practiced grace, offering me a greeting sweet enough for outsiders, but edged with something only I noticed. I had seen that smile my entire life. Pretty, performative, hollow. Hi, sis, she said, brushing her hand against my sleeve as if dusting me off. You made it. The thing about Serena is this. If you only knew her casually, you would adore her. If you knew her well, you would understand the performance. But if you grew up with her, if you lived through years of comparison, competition, and carefully crafted cruelty, then you would recognize every flicker of insecurity hiding beneath those sparkling eyes. She had spent a lifetime trying to outrun a shadow she believed I cast. Not because I tried to overshadow her, but because every compliment handed to me landed on her like a blow. And Christmas, our most public holiday, was the stage she never wanted to share. The dinner table reflected her throne. She sat between my parents, glowing under the lights, fielding compliments and steering conversations like she owned the air between us. I was placed 3 seats away, a decorative afterthought between relatives who could barely remember what state I lived in. The imbalance wasn't new. What was new was the way it no longer stung. It simply clarified. Serena performed, laughed, narrated her life like a highlight reel, every story framed to make her shine brighter. My family laughed, nodded, mirrored her energy, and I sat quietly, the same role I had played for decades. Except this time I wasn't shrinking. I was watching, not bitterly, not jealously, just clearly. Because if this night was going to break open, and I knew it wouldn't be because I came ready to fight. It would be because Serena couldn't help herself. And in the soft glow of that overly decorated dining room, with Christmas music humming in the background and snow falling silently outside, she was already winding herself up for a spectacle she didn't know would destroy her. Tonight she would push too far. Tonight she would aim a little too sharply. And tonight, for the first time in 34 years, I wouldn't let the blow land quietly. It happened when dessert was being passed around. The kind of moment where people start to relax, loosen their smiles, let the wine warm their sentences. My aunt had asked Serena about her New Year plans, and she launched into a dramatic explanation of some ski trip with her husband, complete with hand gestures and exaggerated astonishment that the world wasn't joining them. Then she turned toward me, her eyes glittering with something dangerous, a familiar shift. When she wanted to humiliate, she telegraphed it with a tiny upward tilt of her chin. I noticed it instantly. "And what about you, Mara?" she asked. "What are you doing for New Year's? Or Christmas Eve?" Her voice softened just enough to feel like sugar coating a blade. "Oh, wait, I forgot. Still single. So probably nothing special." The table stirred with awkward laughter, the kind people use when they want to avoid taking sides. My mother's face tightened for a second, then softened quickly into a hostess smile. My father cleared his throat. My aunt looked pleased for reasons I didn't understand, and Serena leaned back, waiting for my reaction like it was entertainment she had paid for. I should explain something. This wasn't the first time she had taken that shot. She had been making comments about my supposed perpetual singleness for years. The irony was that she didn't actually care whether I was single or not. What she cared about was the hierarchy she used to survive. She needed to be newer, shinier, more desired, more chosen. Me being married would destroy her entire system of self-worth. She had spent years ensuring I remained the less than. And she believed it so fully that she never questioned whether her belief matched reality. Which was why, instead of defending myself or firing back, I just looked at her with a calmness I didn't even have to fake. She mistook it for embarrassment. She always did. She smirked. "I mean, it must be hard, right? Christmas after Christmas and still no one to bring home?" The cousin beside me sucked in a breath through his teeth. Even he knew the line had gone too far. I set down my fork, wiped my fingers on my napkin, and finally looked directly at her. "Serena," I said, my tone even, almost gentle. "Are you absolutely sure you know my relationship status?" She blinked. A tiny flicker of confusion. Not much, but enough to crack her performance. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. But I didn't answer. At least not yet. I had learned something this past year. The best revenge was not a shout or a slap. It was slow, controlled, methodical. It was letting someone walk confidently into the trap they built for you, unaware it was theirs. It was silence used like a blade. My non-answer unsettled her. She glanced toward my mother as if expecting backup, then back at me, like she was trying to read a sentence she couldn't see all the words to. "Don't be weird," she said lightly, waving her hand. "Of course you're single. You'd tell us if you weren't." I smiled. Not wide, not smug, just a simple, quiet curve of the lips. That was when the first thread of panic tightened in her eyes. But I didn't pull yet. Not tonight. Not this early. The night had barely begun. There's something I haven't said yet. I wasn't single. Not for a long time. I had gotten married 8 months earlier in a ceremony by the water. Simple, beautiful, intimate. 20 people, close friends, colleagues, and one chair that should have been occupied by my family, left empty in the second row. Not because I didn't invite them, but because someone made sure they never knew. I discovered the truth slowly, painfully. At first, I thought my parents' silence was some disastrous misunderstanding. I had mailed physical invitations and followed up with digital ones. I had called, I had texted. Nothing. Instead of explanations, I received absence. I told myself a story that made it hurt less. Maybe they felt ashamed that they hadn't helped pay for the wedding. Maybe they were avoiding the awkwardness. Maybe they just needed time. But then one night, a month after the ceremony, I asked myself the question I hadn't dared consider. What if they never received the invitations? I checked the postal tracking. All 5 envelopes had been delivered. All 5 had been signed for. All 5 bore a signature I recognized instantly, the looping, flourishing S my sister had practiced for years. I sat with the knowledge for a long time. I didn't confront her then. I wanted to, but something stopped me. Not fear, not confusion. It was the weight of something deeper. The realization that my absence from her world wasn't an accident. It was curated. I checked the digital logs next. Someone had opened the email invitations from my parents' IP address. Someone had deleted them immediately after. Someone who lived at that address. Someone who cared enough to intercept both digital and physical traces of my wedding, but not enough to hide the evidence properly. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. And as weeks passed, something became clear. She wasn't just being cruel. She wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to outrun something. A pattern I had missed growing up began to connect. All those childhood comparisons, all the ways she had tried to outshine me, all the frantic energy behind her perfection. It wasn't pettiness. Not really. It was fear. Fear of being second. Fear of being overshadowed. Fear of being nothing. Marriage, in her mind, was the ultimate badge of worthiness, a proof that you were chosen over the world. And if I, her older sister, the one she had spent years framing as invisible and undesirable, suddenly appeared with a wedding ring and a life she couldn't replicate or control, the fragile identity she'd built would collapse. So she prevented it. She didn't just want to be the center of the family, she needed to be. That was her darkness, and she had finally stepped too deep into it. Back to the dinner table. Serena was still waiting for an answer to her mockery, though by now her smile looked strained. My parents were trying to glide past the tension, but they couldn't ignore the moment hanging in the air like static. I let the room quiet for a breath, then two, then three. Finally, I reached for my bag, placed it gently on my lap, and said, "You're so sure I'm single. But let's find out what you actually know." That sentence froze the table. Serena's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing, Mara?" But I didn't look at her. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Not aggressively, just firmly, like placing the first tile in a line of dominoes. My father frowned. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly," I said. "Actually, I've wanted to talk about something for a while." My mother stiffened. She hated unscripted conversations at the dinner table, especially those she didn't orchestrate. I opened a single file. "I'd like to start with this." The tracking page glowed on the screen. 5 envelopes, 5 destinations, all marked delivered, and all signed for. I zoomed in on the signature slowly. Serena's, an unmistakable looped S. The table leaned closer involuntarily, like gravity had pulled them. Serena's face went pale, then blotchy, then sharp. "Oh, come on," she said, forcing a laugh. "You know how mail is. I sign for stuff all the time. Packages, letters, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. You're making it sound like—" She stopped. Too late. She had given me exactly what I needed. I tilted my head. "So you admit you signed for my mail?" "I admit nothing," she snapped. "You're twisting things. It was probably junk. Or holiday cards. Or—" I swiped to the next file before she could finish. "Not junk. A delivery confirmation email. From the Postal Service, listing each envelope as accepted at my parents' address. Same date, same time, same signature." My mother stared at the screen, then at Serena. "Sweetheart," she said carefully. "You signed for all of these? It's not a crime," Serena hissed. "People sign for stuff all the time. I was just helping out. Mom, tell her she's being dramatic." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "All right," I said softly. "Let's assume it was an accident. Let's assume you signed without looking. Let's assume you didn't open anything." Her jaw clenched. My father leaned forward. "What exactly are these envelopes, Mara?" I waited until every pair of eyes rested on me. "They were wedding invitations," I said finally. "Mine." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. My mother blinked like she had misheard. "Wedding? What?" "I got married 8 months ago," I said. "By the water. Small ceremony. Beautiful day." My aunt gasped. My cousin stared. My father's face cracked open with raw confusion. You got married? He asked. Why didn't you tell us? I did, I said. 5 mailed invitations, 5 digital ones, 7 phone calls, 10 text messages, 12 voicemails, all ignored. My mother clutched the edge of the table. Mara, we never saw any. I know, I said, because someone made sure you wouldn't. Serena slammed her hand on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. This is insane, she yelled. Why would I ever hide your wedding? Why would I care? But her voice shook. She was cornered, and she knew it. My father tried one last lifeline. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Serena thought. I swiped again. An email log appeared. The invitations had been opened from their home Wi-Fi, deleted seconds later. My mother covered her mouth. My father's hand dropped limply into his lap. Still, he tried. Serena wouldn't do that on purpose, he said weakly. Maybe she clicked it by accident. Maybe. Serena exploded. Why are we trusting her? She lies. She exaggerates everything. She wants attention. I turned to her fully for the first time. I have one last thing, I said. Shall we look at it? Her face drained. Don't. But I tapped the final file. A security camera screenshot. My parents had installed a doorbell cam last year, showing Serena at the front door, signing for the envelopes, glancing around and tucking them into her bag. Everyone froze. My mother whispered, Why? Why would you do that? Serena's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she snapped. Because she doesn't deserve to be ahead of me. The words tore out of her like she'd been holding them for years. She was always the perfect one, the quiet one, the one people praised without trying. Do you know what it's like growing up hearing how she never needed help, never caused trouble, how she made everything look easy? I had to fight for every scrap of attention. And then she goes off and gets married first? Before me? Before I could... Before I... She crumpled, voice breaking. I couldn't let that happen. The room went dead. My father stared at her like she was a stranger. My mother's lips trembled. Even her husband, sitting beside her, leaned slowly away from her like he had just discovered something monstrous. Serena looked at him desperately. You believe me, right? You understand why I... He stood up, and without a word, he walked toward the door. Colin! She cried. Where are you going? Colin! He didn't look back. He left. And the door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through every candlelit corner of the house. I didn't stay long after that. I gathered my coat. I thanked my parents for dinner. I wished everyone a Merry Christmas in a tone so neutral it hurt. No one stopped me. My father looked devastated but silent. My mother seemed lost, as if trying to stitch the evening back together with trembling hands. My aunt avoided my gaze entirely. My cousin gave me a look that contained both pity and awe. And Serena, she sat collapsed in her chair, mascara streaked, breathing uneven. She didn't speak to me. She could barely speak at all. Everything she had built, her image, her marriage, her superiority, had crumbled in 30 minutes. I walked out into the crisp night air, snowflakes landing on my coat. The cold felt clean, sharp, final. I didn't go home alone. My wife picked me up from the end of the driveway. She didn't need to ask what happened. She just reached for my hand, and I let the warmth of her fingers unwind every knot inside me. 2 days later, I sent out digital Christmas cards to the entire extended family. A beautiful image of us in our wedding attire, standing by the water, sunlight behind us. At the bottom, thank you to everyone who celebrated our wedding with us earlier this year. The messages rolled in instantly. You got married? When? Why didn't we know? Serena told us you weren't having a ceremony. She said you called it off. Why would she lie? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I heard from my aunt later that Serena had spent Christmas night in hysterics, her phone blowing up with relatives demanding explanations. Her husband didn't come home. Her parents didn't come to her defense. And for the first time in her life, the performance she relied on, the thing she believed she could control, collapsed entirely. As for my parents, they didn't apologize. Not directly. They called once, left a voicemail saying they wanted to talk when I was ready. I didn't call back. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. Their silence no longer stabbed the way it used to. I wasn't waiting for their validation anymore. Freedom tastes different when you stop begging for what was never given freely. And as for Serena, she never reached out. Not a text, not a call, not a note. I heard through distant relatives that she moved back to her old apartment, alone. Her husband filed for separation. The world she built on comparisons had finally stopped holding her up. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to. Her destruction wasn't my victory. My victory was simple. I no longer cared whether she changed. I no longer cared whether any of them did. For the first time in my life, I walked away without turning back. And that truly was the real revenge.